I do expect Tom Zarul from AMGEN to be dialed in. Um, I don't know if anyone else will be dialed in, but we'll see. And then we'll get started in about 2 more minutes. Hopefully you guys can see the agenda for tonight. Hopefully it makes sense. I'm thinking 10 minutes per presentation and then 10 minutes for Q&A. You'll have to excuse me. I'm starting to lose my voice, as you can tell. I think I have a cold, which is another reason to hold this thing online so you guys don't get sick. I do want to encourage you all to consider taking MEM 429, which is negotiations next quarter. I'm going to have a good number of students from MPM in the course, so you'll have additional students besides MEM taking it. It's probably going to be one of your more valuable courses in the long run, and especially if you do any kind of negotiations with clients, with suppliers, with your peers, with subordinates. We basically cover all sorts of different scenarios. So consider taking the class. It's mirrored after what they do at Kellogg, but it's tailored to the engineering scenarios that I believe you're going to see in your career.
Professor, is it possible to audit it because
Yeah.
I don't have any elective credits left?
Yeah, if you'd like
That's
to
the main
audit it,
reason.
just let me know. Send me an email with your net ID, and then I can add you to the course as an observer, and then you can participate in the negotiations.
Got it, Professor.
You'll have
Thank
to
you.
buy the case studies like everybody else, but you can skip the midterm and the final project. All I really ask is that you do the negotiations week by week.
Understood. Yeah.
Okay. All right. With that, it looks like people are showing up. This session is being recorded, so thank you all for coming. This is the final presentations for 426 project management. This is the agenda for tonight. I tried to keep everybody to 20-minute segments, 10 minutes for presentation, 10 minutes for Q&A. What's different this year is that I have smaller teams. I normally had 3 or 4 person teams. This year we have 2 or 1 person teams. So I think that's kind of interesting. I also recognize that we're on the advent of LLMs and AI. So I think the key is not so much, you know, forbidding you from using AI. I'm encouraging you to use AI in an intelligent way. So I expect you to know what's in the content. I expect you to know where it came from. If you use AI, I need you to cite it or at least explain, what AI tools you used. And where does it work and where does it run out of gas? I think that's an interesting commentary for this quarter or this year. I know for a fact that you get a lot of not just hallucinations, extrapolations and assumptions and misdirections coming out of AI. So it's a very powerful and yet potentially dangerous tool. So, um, any comments before we get started? I want to see if Tom is with us. Tom, I think you're here. I want to welcome you.
Yes, I just joined. Sorry, I'm a minute late. It's great to
No
be here.
problem. It's good to have you. Thank you for coming. I'm glad you were able to dial in. Why don't we get started? You can see the agenda here. We got the first 3 projects or AMGEN projects. I have no idea how to pronounce that first one. Maybe Tom can help me.
We just call it Bima because it's
Bima?
impossible to pronounce it. So
Yeah.
it's widely referred to as Bima.
Well, you'll like this story. My sister, who's a degreed engineer, decided to go to law school, and she's focused on trademarks. And
Nice.
she works almost exclusively with pharmaceuticals. So I can make fun of her because I'm no doubt she made up names just like this one. She probably thinks it's unique and it's, defensible and all these wonderful legal attributes. But from my perspective, it's really hard to remember. So how good
It's
can it be?
so this is the scientific name. It's Bima ridotuzumab is how you pronounce it. But to actually get the trademark name, it is insane how much work needs to be done to ensure one, we're not taking somebody else's trademark, But then two, we're not coming up with a name that the FDA may be concerned about beyond trademark issues as well too. And that's a whole nother discussion. I don't want to interrupt the flow here
And the
today.
truth is that would be a sub-project of amongst many sub-projects in something as complicated as this. So
We're doing that right now for our anti-obesity investigational drug, and it's going to take months essentially. And it needs
wow.
approval from regulatory authorities around the world, not just the FDA, like the EMA is what we're working with now.
Right. All right, George, take it away. You've got 10 minutes for presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you. So quick intro. My name is George Oliver. I'm a student in the MEM program, part-time student. My background's in electrical engineering. So prior to this project, I had no experience with drug development or anything like that. So just a quick agenda. I'll go over the BEMA background, quick market analysis, touch on the drug development timeline, risk and cost analysis, and then kind of the proposed solution and conclusion of the project. So first of all, BEMA is a drug that's used to treat gastric and gastroesophageal junction cancer, so G/GEJ cancers. This is, I believe, the fifth leading cause of cancer deaths in the world. 1 million people are diagnosed yearly, 650,000 die from it yearly. So the differentiator for this drug is that the biomarker that's used to actually bind to the tumor itself, it's the FGFR2b biomarker. Currently, there's targeted therapy available that targets the HER2, HER2 receptor on that's common in gastric cancers. About 30% of these cancers have this biomarker, and 15 to 20% have the HER2. There's not a lot of overlap between the two, so this could be a good targeted therapy for people suffering from this disease. And how it works, it kind of binds to the cell. It prevents this further proteins from binding and spreading and growing the tumor. In addition to that, it also attracts your body's immune system to actually attack the tumor itself and slow growth that way. I'll go into this a little bit more with the market analysis, but this was the only drug that I found with this FGFR2 receptor biomarker that's currently in phase 3 development for the clinical trials. All the other drugs failed at phase 2 development. I believe there was one by AstraZeneca and one by Bayer that failed at that point. So the market analysis, I found that the total accessible market currently in 2026 is 6.74 billion. This is also including other treatments such as chemotherapy. It's not just only targeted therapy or immunotherapy. It's kind of the sum of all the parts there. And actually, the FGFR2 drugs had the highest projected compound annual growth rate of 12.49%. I use this later on for kind of my calculations for net present value of the project, and the estimate for that I found the low estimate of tumors with this biomarker is 30 to 38%. And the estimate of the total accessible market that's specifically for targeted therapy was about 20 to 25%. So I kind of use these to anchor the obtainable market that's possible to treat with this drug here. It's about 400 to 640 million dollars available there in 2026. 2031 it will be about 725 to 1.15 billion. So just a quick touching on the drug development timeline. So we had kind of discussed this in lecture when Tom had previously joined us. He kind of went over these stages here, but just as a refresher, we start at the early discovery and preclinical trials, and it moves. Those are very low percentage, high risk, not likely to move on to the next phases. Phase 1 and phase 2, I guess you could say phase 2 is kind of the next bottleneck. I saw that it was about only 15 to 25% advanced from there. Phase 3, which is where BEMA is currently being tested at, there's actually a 40 to 60% chance of progressing to the next stage with FDA approval. And then phase 4 is kind of ongoing after it's approved by the FDA, kind of looking for any risks that might pop up associated with using the drug. So again, you can see here it's a very extended timeline over several years for the project to properly develop. So the major risks specifically associated with BEMA. So as I mentioned before, they're currently in their phase 3 clinical trials. So they had completed the Fortitude-1 study, which actually had initial promising results. But unfortunately, it appears that the survivorship of it has attenuated over time, so that it's more in line now with the placebo effects from the study. And Fortitude-2 study, this was actually canceled early due to poor results. To me, this is the first and foremost, like the highest risk associated with this project here. If the efficacy can't be proven, you can't be FDA approved, and you're not going to have an effective drug or product that can effectively treat gastric cancer. So one question I kind of had, and I'll kind of go into this more, is maybe if I had a better background in the bio industry, would be if a possible third study might be useful. So that was one of the assumptions I made later on with kind of presenting some options that maybe there could be a third clinical trial that could be done with different sort of treatment, and that could possibly be used to kind of progress to the next stage. Of course, safety and tolerability is always a huge risk. Any sort of toxicity impact, obviously that's not beneficial to have in a drug that's treating cancer. And if you have a high risk of side effects, it may make it less likely for people to use your treatment. So this is kind of tied into the post-approval testing. And then, of course, the last risk is clinical adoption. So it's possible, I believe, according to the law, that the drug has to be FDA approved first. So maybe it's not part of this project timeline, but something that the project manager may be working with a marketing team post-release of the drug to kind of work with doctors and promote the usage of it and kind of really highlight the differences between like currently used targeted therapy drugs and what BEMA can actually accomplish. So the three options I kind of came up with on how to proceed from phase 3 clinical trials. The first, I kind of called it the bury your head in the sand. So it seemed like both of the Fortitude-1 and Fortitude studies kind of failed. To me, this makes it seem as though there's going to be a low chance of it being accepted. So I estimated it to be around 5% based on these results of these trials. So I just gave it kind of a really low estimate. And based on only needing FDA approval, this is only going to take about 1.5 years. Option 2 would be that additional trial, and this would be where I would kind of rely on the engineering team or the AMGEN team to kind of provide some previous context in other projects that we've worked on, similar drugs. What happens when there's a failure in phase 3 trials? Is this typical? Is it abnormal? So the suggestion here and the assumption that I made was that this is going to anchor us more towards that lower end of the 40%, 40 to 60% chance of advancing to the next stage. And then option 3 would be just to discontinue. Maybe based on these 2 trials, that's enough to understand that FDA approval is not likely. Don't accrue the costs. There's obviously an opportunity cost related to this too. If your team continues working on something that has no hope of being approved. So I found, based off a study in 2013, so probably a bit outdated at this point, but this is what I used in my analysis. The first three phases have a typical cost of 340 million. The phase three costs are the majority of this, and it was estimated on most projects to be around $250 million. So the current, as I said, the highest risk is kind of the efficacy. So if we were to run another trial and costs were a prohibitive factor, you definitely have a high risk of overrunning your costs. It seems in this industry, though, that costs aren't really going to be prohibitive. As kind of noted before, a lot of the upfront work done when the early discovery stages, typically, like, it's very rare that that even advances beyond that stage. So, and then just kind of a note here on how I calculated the net present value. So I kind of stated this before. I did a growth rate of 12.5% through 2031. I figured that maybe the growth would cap there, 10% discount rate. And as I kind of mentioned before, this is the only drug that's currently this far along that would work with the biomarker specifically. So I made the assumption as well that we'd capture a large market share since this would be the only drug available to kind of treat in this way. So just kind of a quick summary here of the net present value of the revenue that I calculated, and then the costs of failure. And then I kind of created a decision tree based off this that will show what choices to kind of make here. So again, so option one, it's just kind of say, okay, let's just keep going with the FDA approval. Option two would be additional phase three trial, where I also added in again a 250 million extra compared to here about, and then decrease from the revenue. Just it's going to be a 2-year delay in the project, so you have a higher discount rate in the future. And then option three, which would be just to eat the project cost at that point, discontinue. So kind of based off this and the weighted net present values, based off my assumptions and my calculations, appears that option two would be the best way to go. Of course, if I were consulting with the engineering team and they say, well, it's likely that this isn't going to be a 40%, and this is actually closer to 0% versus 5%. Maybe in that case, this option three might be the best because it failed the 2 trials. But this would be kind of what I would present, kind of this decision tree here. Moving on to the conclusion here. So again, as I mentioned, continue with the additional phase 3 trials to mitigate the risk. Of course, the possible market share, I think, since this would be the only product kind of targeting this biomarker, the only one that'd be able to target it and treat it, it's kind of too great to immediately discontinue. As I mentioned before, if my assumptions on a 3rd trial are incorrect and it actually doesn't get us close to that 40%, the calculus kind of changes there. And again, if it fails the next trial, maybe we'd want to reevaluate again, kind of come to the same decision tree, update our costs, and kind of move from there. And I just kind of short overall statement of the impact of the project management in terms of drug development. It's just kind of a reminder that costs of your timeline slipping. It's not just money. There's a bigger picture to this. This is being used to treat people who are very sick, have a low chance of survival. So the time that we lose from poor project management is also costing people, their health and their lives, and causing pain to families who are kind of dealing with this. And the other highlight too would be that having this proper planning, you can have more effective project selection and a better portfolio management for the company in determining like what target areas to pursue and how to go from there. So, does anyone have any questions? Feel free to
Well,
ask them now.
let me just jump in and say I thought you did a great job. You made it very understandable. You were working alone. I know you probably had a lot of help from some AI tools. You made it understandable. You made it easy to digest. And for somebody who's an electrical engineer, I know this is way outside your comfort zone. So I give you double credit for that. What role did AI play in helping you develop this analysis?
Yeah. Well, one thing actually, I think it uh, preparing even just the PowerPoint, like I used some AI tools with that, and that was kind of helpful for trying to organize my thoughts better and present them in a clear and effective way. In terms of the research, I did use it to kind of help me find some sources. Where it failed was, for example, I was mentioning um, I started to kind of press it some more on details with the actual studies that it was trying to draw some stuff, and it seemed to have some hallucinations related to that. So although it did kind of guide me in the direction, I still kind of had to still do use Google or other search tools to kind of find effective sources versus the AI tool itself, you know. So it kind of says something I'd have to go and fact check and kind of move from there. So
The way you did your optionality at the end, you looked at three different options and then you put a decision tree against that. I've seen other approaches where you take the decision tree and you look at every step in the process that still needs to be completed. And then you look at the probabilities of going, let's say phase 3 trials or phase 4 trials. What's the likelihood of success? And then you can collapse the tree using that approach. But I think this approach is actually easier to understand and it's easier to synthesize at a high level. So I liked it, but to be honest with you, I think it's the first time I've ever seen it done this way. So it's pretty cool. Tom, what did you think? You're the real expert here.
I think George did a great job. And one, I'm if you go back, I can't remember how many years I've been coming to this class, Professor Warath, but this is the first time that at least I remember where a therapy, an investigational drug that has had some challenges late stage in phase 3 has actually been evaluated. A lot of the cases that we've talked about, like the end outcome and the end recommendations, are to pursue investment, submit FDA approval, right? Because they're investigational drugs that we had good outcomes for. This one is really interesting in that BEMA actually initially was illustrating great efficacy results. And I think George highlighted to it in phase 2, we were showing double life expectancy versus the current treatment options for this terrible gastric cancer, gastric cancer from 12 months to anywhere between 18 and 24 months survival rate, which oncologists were like super, super excited about. When we advanced our phase 3 studies, unfortunately, the outcomes of our more robust phase 3 studies were showing survival rates that were closer to chemo only. And so right now, like another reason this is good is like this is very timely in that like one, Amgen has not decided to fully abandon this treatment right now, and we're going and we're really taking a look at like patient subpopulations or potentially introducing this treatment a little bit earlier on in the patient's journey, as opposed to when the cancer is at a more advanced stage, to see if we can get more efficacy to determine whether or not we're going to continue to investigate this drug in gastric cancer. And I don't know the outcomes of that right now. And essentially, that is what is framing our company's decision right now, is really looking at the data from our phase 2 and phase 3 trials in subpopulations of patients that were studied to see if our smart scientists ultimately can see favorability from an efficacy perspective that would justify investing in an additional phase 3 study going forward. And George, you did a great job kind of articulating that. At the end of the day, the science is going to tell us whether or not we are going to invest in this drug or whether we're going to abandon it altogether.
Well, the
And
science, the science and the finances, right?
it's yeah, I mean, well, the finances too, right? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, great job putting together estimates for this. Costs of investigating drugs are very different based on the therapeutic area. Typically in oncology, they're higher than the estimates that you would have across all different investigational drugs. I can tell you that I don't know the exact number, but we definitely have invested over $1 billion in this drug. And we are facing a potential scenario where we have to abandon this drug altogether because it showed promise all the way up until the very end. And that's why the FDA has different phases of studies. So the industry does a very comprehensive job evaluating whether a drug is safe and efficacious to use, especially in these types of patient populations. And so, great job. You're very comprehensive. I think your conclusions are probably where we are going to be landing as well too. And we're certainly not going to be submitting for FDA right now because we have not proven that we have a meaningful advancement against the current standard of care. And then you were saying placebo, but really the current standard of care is chemotherapy alone right now for advanced stages of cancer. And for us to be able to submit to the FDA, which would be phase 1, we have to show a meaningful improvement either to the safety profile against chemo or the efficacy. And I don't know that we're convinced that the Fortitude phase 3 trials can demonstrate that. And so we're going through the analysis right now, whether we go down route 2 or route 3. And at the end of the day, to Professor Wereweth, it's going to be one, do we have confidence that potentially we can identify a population of gastric oncology patients benefiting substantially from this drug? And then if so, looking at those percentages against how much the costs are to make a decision based on what's in the best interest of the company.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, George. I know we are joined by Arbella. I know, Arbella, you probably didn't get to hear the whole presentation. Did you want to say anything?
I'm listening, Mark.
Okay.
I joined halfway, but fascinating topic. Thank you for the invite.
Sure. This is the agenda so that you're aware of what we're going to be doing tonight. We've got 3 AMGEN drugs that are in development. Tom is an executive over at AMGEN, so he's giving us some expert feedback. We've got 2 data center projects, and then ultimately a smelter project, which is fundamentally a mining project out in Tennessee. So we've got an interesting variety. The students pick their own projects. They're working in ultra small teams because AI is an acceptable tool here. So
Very good.
so as a result, teams are smaller and they're more agile. The next team up is AMGEN. We've got Venkat and Christian, who's going to be looking at AMG 890.
Yes, hi, Professor.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay, thank you.
Can you see my screen?
We can, and we can also hear you. So
Perfect. Dinesh, you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Awesome. All right. Well, hello. Today, Dinesh and I will be presenting a strategic analysis and project overview of Amgen's cardiovascular drug, olpasiran, also known as AMG 890. First, to understand the value of the project, we first need to look at the massive scale of atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, or easier, ASCVD. ASCVD is a leading cause of mortality that affects over 523 million people worldwide. It involves the buildup of plaque that hardens and narrows the arteries, which restricts vital blood flow. Within this massive population, we are targeting a specific subset of individuals with elevated lipoprotein, or LPA. That, like cholesterol, it is a risk factor that can lead to ASCVD and severe cardiovascular events. Up to 20% of the global population has elevated levels of LPA, and in the United States alone, this translates to roughly 6.8 million people. So what are the limitations of the current standard of care? The major issue with elevated LPA is that it is 70 to 90% genetically determined. Because of this, traditional lifestyle modifications like dietary changes, physical exercise regimens are largely ineffective at lowering LPA. Even standard therapies like the use of statin, which is the go-to medication for lowering bad cholesterol, does not lower LPA levels and may actually increase levels in some patients. Therefore, this leaves a massive void in the market as there are currently no FDA-approved treatments that specifically exist for LPA reduction. So this is where AMGEN's olpasiran comes in. It utilizes a new gene silencing technology. The medication targets and silences the LPA gene directly in the liver. It effectively stops the production of the LPA at the source. The clinical efficacy has been outstanding. Phase 1 and Phase 2 trials demonstrated a reduction greater than 90% in LPA levels across a diverse patient population. Administration is also very convenient as it is administered via subcutaneous injections with a flexible schedule of every 12 to 24 weeks. It is currently AMGEN's lead candidate for cardiovascular risk reduction, and it is in Phase 3 clinical development. So what is the competitive landscape of this medication? AMGEN is not alone in the race of developing a drug for LPA reduction. The primary competitor is Eli Lilly's lepodisiran. Both drugs rely on the same technology of siRNA. But olpasiran has a strategic edge as it has superior efficacy and a secondary effect of also reducing bad cholesterol. However, lepodisiran also has an advantage due to its convenience, as it has a longer dosing interval of 24 to 48 weeks, which might result in better adoptance of the drug. So far in the drug development timeline, we can see that it typically spans anywhere from 10 to 15 years from discovery to approval. Olpasiran successfully navigated through preclinical through Phase 2 trials between 2015 and 2022. AMGEN acquired the exclusive rights for the development of this drug from Arrowhead Pharmaceuticals in 2015-2016, and it continues to pay milestone fees as the drug development progresses. So whenever it moves from Phase 2 to Phase 3, it has to pay a milestone fee to the original pharmaceutical that discovered this drug. In December 2022, it entered the Phase 3 trials, and this is the most critical stage for cardiovascular drugs, as it spans usually 5 years to see that this medication is actually preventing severe cardiovascular events. These trials are expected to conclude in 2028, and assuming that the data is positive, we project final FDA approval around 2029 or 2030.
Now let's look at the financial investment required to bring this therapy to market. Our total estimated project cost is approximately 302 million, which consists of two major categories. First is the licensing and milestone payments to Arrowhead Pharmaceuticals, which accounts for about $101.5 million. Second is the operational costs of clinical trials. Based on our research, we've seen that Phase 1 and Phase 2 costs about 11 million. But then when it comes to Phase 3, these trials are extremely expensive, particularly for the cardiovascular drugs that require a large patient population. In this case, Phase 3 operations are estimated to cost about $175 million, which accounts for more than half of the total investment. Finally, in addition to this, there's also an regulatory submission costs that we've taken into account. So we see that there's a majority financial risk that is occurring in the Phase 3 of our drug development. Moving on, we have the project risks. Phase 3 trials are also where the highest level of project risks occurs. Historically, the cardiovascular drugs have about 35% failure rate during Phase 3 trials. The main causes of these failures are typically bifurcated into three categories. The most common is lack of clinical efficacy, which accounts for about 44% of failure. The second major risk is safety concerns, which accounts for about 24% of the failures. When a patient population increases from a few hundred patients to several thousand, rare side effects can sometimes emerge, which can result into uh, which can result into safety concerns. And then there is also your competitive risks. Competitors like Novartis and Eli Lilly are developing similar therapies using different technologies. So it is important for us to take these project risks into account. Moving forward, we have the target market and adoption barriers. From a commercial perspective, the potential market opportunity is substantial. Based on the data, the addressable market is estimated roughly anywhere between 1.7 to 2 million high-risk patients with ASVCD and elevated LPA levels. However, we believe there are some we need to take the adoption barrier into account. Currently, there are fewer than 15% of the patients who have been tested for LPA. This means that millions of high-risk patients remain undiagnosed. What does this mean for our drug? For it to reach a full market potential, there needs to be a change in the ecosystem. This includes expanded LPA screening guidelines, increase in your physician awareness, and broader insurance reimbursement coverage. Moving on to the next slide, we have the financial projections. Assuming a successful regulatory approval, the financial outlook for our drug is quite promising. Based on benchmarks from similar drugs and therapies, we assume a price of approximately $10,000 per patient per year. Using a conservative adoption curve, the projected revenue trajectory would look like anywhere between 180 million for year one, where we are assuming a 1% market penetration. And as we transition to year three, this is about 50, which is about 1 billion annually, when we are targeting about a 6% market penetration. Finally, moving on to our strategic recommendation. Based on our clinical, financial, and marketing analysis, our recommendation is a go decision for continued development. There are several reasons for this. First, there is a strong unmet medical need for this without no current approved therapies targeting LPA. Second, the drug has demonstrated a good clinical efficacy. Third, the addressable market is extremely large, particularly among high risk patients. And finally, financial modeling suggests that there is a strong upside within potential to be a blockbuster drug within 3 years. While we have come up with this go decision, it is also important for us to have some sort of a contingency plan as a safety net. So we come up with three options. Option one is to outlicense the asset. AMGEN could license the drug to another pharmaceutical company that specializes in this therapy area. The pro of this is it recovers part of the investment through licensing fee and reduces financial exposure. But a major disadvantage is the long-term loss of commercial upside. Second option is to have a strategic partnership. AMGEN could form a joint venture with another company to share the costs of the later stage development and commercialization. And finally, it is to fully terminate the program based on the um, medical results that we see in the phase 3 development of the drug. Our recommended contingency strategy is to continue developing this drug while building a strategic partnership with another cardiovascular pharmaceutical company. Thank you.
All right, nice job. I especially liked your competitive analysis. I thought you did a really good job with that. Also, the history of the technology, which was important, I think, to cover. You also mentioned progress payments to the licensor, which I think is an interesting subtlety here. So I'm assuming in your financial analysis, you covered all of the license and royalty fees that would have to be paid through the life of the program. Is that true?
Yes.
That's correct,
Okay.
Professor. Yeah.
Yep. So, I mean, in that sense, I'm kind of curious how you can justify sub-licensing to somebody else so that they can manufacture the drug. Would that be even financially viable, given all the licensing costs you have to pay to the licensor?
For the final recommendation, we've gone ahead to we've only studied the scenario where AMGEN is selling the drug, and there's a potential for AMGEN to touch a $1 billion mark. And in the projections, we've not explored the aspect of having a joint venture with a similar company.
Right. Okay, good. So that makes sense.
Yeah, also, Professor, from my research so far, I'm not 100% sure about this, but what I could find is that post FDA approval, there are no more milestone payments
Oh,
in the
good.
contract for Arrowhead
Okay.
Pharmaceuticals. At least that's what I could gather from AMGEN's press release.
Okay. Now, I think this demonstrates how I mentioned almost at the beginning of the quarter how a technology, as it progresses and becomes de-risked, which is what you're effectively doing as you go through the various phases of clinical trials, you're de-risking the technology, you're adding value to the technology at the same time. And through adding of that value, you're paying the licensor effectively for the increased valuation of the technology. You're compensating them for their initial contribution to the creation of this technology. So that's important to note. Tom, I know you gave them a round of applause. I'm curious what you have to say to these guys.
I really like how you structured it into three different points to evaluate. One was your first was unmet need. Second was is the results of our trials showing an clinical advancements to the patient population, and then the financial benefits. I'm going to skip over unmet needs because I want to focus on that at the very end of what I'm highlighting. But the second one, in terms of advancements, I mean, this is the opposite of the BEMA situation. Right now there's no approved drugs for lowering LPA. There are approved drugs that have demonstrated lowering LPA by up to like 30%. And I think niacin is the one drug that is currently FDA approved that shows those benefits. But to be clear, it's not FDA approved for that. Where our phase 2 results were showing 95%, or in some instances, like, completely removal of any plaque or LPA, which is a huge advancement to the current standard of care of what drugs are currently available for patients that are living with cardiovascular related diseases. So obviously, when we see any data like that, that's substantially better than what the current treatments are. That's a really good thing. Now, I also liked how you identified competition with investigational pipeline drugs, one of which will most likely be approved before we are with less efficacy, and the other one approved after us with a potential better dosing regimen than what olpasiran is. And so that's obviously part of the advancement as well, too, is, well, what are we competing against right now in the moment from a pipeline perspective? And then the financial benefits, very good job kind of going through milestone payments with our partners and what the future sales projections are. I would only highlight here that there's a lot of patients, obviously, that have cardiovascular related diseases. And so the potential financial benefits could be very, very, very rewarding. But I want to go back to the unmet need. And this is where I know I'm long-winded here, but this is the biggest question that we're facing for olpasiran. It's not whether this drug works for LPA. What we need to prove, in addition to our drug working, in addition to our drug being safe, which is normally what you do, is we're still investigating and we're looking for research that shows by lowering LPA, you're substantially reducing the risk of heart attacks or other coronary events. And so that's why, like, all these things are, from one therapeutic area to the next, things are quite different, right? So what we need to see is more research that proves that lowering LPA, which we clearly are doing right now, actually is providing clinical benefits in terms of like less heart attacks, less coronary events, etc. All of which could obviously have major impact implications on the future financial benefits of this treatment as well too. And so great job, you guys, like going through the key areas. It's going to be really interesting to see whether or not we can advance research that shows lowering LPA has substantial benefits on the broader treatment of patients that are living with cardiovascular diseases.
All right, nice job. Thank you all. I thank Nicholas and Dinesh. Any other comments?
Hey, Mark, This is Arbella. Actually, I had a similar comment. Great job, very thorough here. I happen to know something about LPA because a close family member actually had a high LPA. And the comment from the cardiologist actually mirrors what, is that George? I apologize.
Tom was just talking.
Tom just mentioned. And that I think the study that you mentioned is really key in terms of how much the doctors and the specialists care about LPA, because the responses that we got is that there's still the correlation between high LPA and a major cardiac event. It's still kind of not quite clear. And we were asked, okay, so if you don't have a high cardiac score, which is a test scan that they do, and whether or not what your LDL, HDL, all of that is, they kind of look at LPA as an indicator, at one of many, as opposed to, oh, you have a high LPA, in this case, very high, you are going to have a heart attack. So that's the only comment. I think what you said in terms of the unmet need and to what extent bringing the medical community on board is probably going to be an area worth thinking about, and it's the only thing that jumped out to me.
All right, thank you, Arbella. The last AMGEN project we have is Rapatha. Alexander, you're going to take it away from here.
Thank you so much, Tom. Thank you, Arbella, for the comments.
Thank you.
Audio coming through all right?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. And is it Rapatha? I thought it's Rapatha. That's what I saw when looking. I actually looked with the one of the instructional videos. It's Rapatha, right?
Rapatha.
Rapatha,
Okay, yeah. I just
Rapatha.
want to make sure I got it right. I was like, wait a minute.
No,
Okay.
I screwed it up because I don't do this.
It's okay.
I don't do this for a living. So
It's okay, Professor. It's as long as we're not in a meeting, marketing to healthcare providers, that would be embarrassing.
I also say Nevada, but I think I'd be kicked out for saying that, right? So
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of things like places that don't the pronunciation or names of things that wouldn't be what you expect. All
right.
the like towns in Wisconsin, I've gotten those a lot wrong many times. But in any case, let me share my screen. And is that showing up?
We can see it. Yep.
Okay, perfect. I want to minimize the. Okay, you know what? I'll just ignore the little zoom thing in the
There you
corner. It
go.
does. Okay, perfect. Well, good evening. My name is Alex Zaski, and to give you a little bit of background, I have my bachelor's in mechanical engineering. I have worked in an adjacent industry since graduating, so it's been, 5 years. Graduating in 2020 was an interesting time, but for just life sciences as a whole, for many reasons. But I've been working in many different medical device companies, ranging from a startup to more of kind of like larger companies, including Abbott and Baxter. Currently, I am a quality engineer in contract manufacturing, so more focus on the quality side than actual R&D, but still within medical devices. And this evening, I'm going to talk about Repatha and a little bit the strategic analysis of where to take things. And to um, one important thing to highlight to differentiate from um, the previous two products that were discussed, this is actually on the market. This is not in the research or development phase with clinical trials and such. It is being sold right now as we speak, and it's available through healthcare providers. So this is more kind of looking at this is going to be more of a high level looking at the later stages of where to take things as it kind of gets closer to the um, over a decade of all the work that's gone into it, and then also having been on the market for closer to, we're getting closer to a decade now. And to kind of first, I'm going to highlight how the actual how the pharmaceutical works. And one thing to highlight, we were talking previously about statins. This is not a statin. A statin has a mechanism where it's stopping the the liver from producing the certain enzymes for processing. But what this is actually um, instead of stopping the sorry, I'm gonna have a little bit of water here. It's I think I'm getting sick as well. So instead of blocking I misspoke. Instead of blocking the production of cholesterol in the liver, it's actually stopping um, the liver from collecting cholesterol that's put into the body. So it's kind of looking at that in reverse. Instead of lowering what the body's producing, it's lowering what's already in the body. So this can be from diet or anything else. Um, but what this does is um, has this protein called PCSK9, and that is going to stop those um, the body's natural collectors of the cholesterol from collecting them. So it's minimizing what's being stored in the body. And that's a way to, instead of saying, we're targeting like, so instead of saying that's um, we'll say like 30% maybe for others like statins and such, we're talking more 60 to 70%, which is a very dramatic difference, especially if there are, um, hereditary conditions that might be impacting the cholesterol absorption by the body. And to get a little bit more into the timeline, obviously this is retrospective because this has already happened. And that's where I was saying a decade. Actually, it's been over a decade. At the time of some of these reports, it was right around a decade there. But now, as we're getting into 2026, it's been a lot longer. And so the whole timeline is approaching 2 decades, actually, with from the discovery phase. So once we hit 2027, that will be 20 years, which is amazing. And it just highlights how much work goes into developing any sort of medication like this, and also highlights how positive the initial stages have been, because to make it this far, as we've discussed previously with other some of the other products, and previously in in our other lectures in the course, it's the likelihood statistically to make it this far, it's a lot lower, especially as there are competitors in the market, which I'm going to touch on in later slides. But right now, products existed for a decade. So the question is, where do we take things next with very strong offerings, but considering also that other companies have had opportunities to offer competitive products. So, and to look at kind of how things have been handled with the product existing on the market for as long as it has, reducing the cost and cutting by the price by 60% was a way to increase the volume, to increase accessibility in cases of perhaps out of pocket payment for these medications, or also it makes it easier in terms of negotiating with insurance providers if we're talking about US market specifically. But obviously this is a product that's available globally, so it varies depending on which market we're talking about specifically, if we were to get more granular. And the projected revenue back in 2024 was 2.2 billion. Um, and that's almost 50% volume increase. We're looking at over 11 billion projected for 2032 if we continue on a current global trajectory. And that's not just with Repatha, that's with all of these PCSK9 pharmaceuticals that exist. So a lot of opportunity there. Um, but I mean, that's still a ways, or it's not actually not as far out as we would think. And there are other products on the market right now, which is what I wanted to touch on next. Um, there are some certain advantages which Repatha offers, but there are also some threats of the other products. So one of the biggest positives in is just in terms of sales. So if we look at Praluent, I feel like I'm mispronouncing that one, honestly, but in terms of prescriptions, Repatha has double the number of prescriptions currently. So that's great. Now, if we look at Novartis's, I'm gonna butcher this one, like Vio, um, so that is a lot less burden on the patient, and it is a lot more convenient in terms of just saying, okay, it's you go into a doctor's office and you have a dosing twice a year instead of something that is self-administered. So there can be challenges with self-administering, um, convenience being one of them, but also that any sort of injection, you have to make sure you get it in the right spot. So that's one of the reasons why for we can compare. This is obviously for treating different conditions, but we've seen a rise in the past couple years, past 5 years, I'll say, with the different delivery methods for um, managing diabetes. So like insulin pumps. There are ones that can go on the arm as a patch rather than having to use rather than having to inject it with syringes. So it's a lot more, the less the patient has to do, or less frequently a patient has to, or I should say, user has to administer a medication, the better. But if we're looking at the actual just data and the performance of the medication itself, um, we see that it's working really well to reduce the markers of cholesterol in the clinical trials. So that's this is a very long acronym here, but this is just if we're looking back at the um, you know, back in the third stage of development, it's working very well for what it's intended to do. Now, the biggest thing get this is one thing that also ties in the last point I wanted to mention, which ties in with the prescription lead, is patient access. So the program AMGEN now, um, this is is a cost savings program which is able to bring the cost down to $239 per month, which, I mean, you spread that out over the course of a year, it's able to be more manageable than saying, here's the upfront cost to be paid. And if there are any, challenges with insurance, it offers another method, especially for self-pay patients. Now, this aside from the just the how the pro how Repatha works itself, it's as something that's been in a development stage for so long. Once we get to 2028, patents expire. So that's where you have something called a biosimilar entry. Um, any sort of where it's using these protein, any um, products which use the PCSK9 protein, there are fewer restrictions in place in terms of, and there's less protection provided for patents because the product has been on the market for so long. And, there are the regulations in place that are saying, you know what, um, as opposed to like a consumer product, right? I would say this is actually true with any products. Given my background a little bit, working with patents and such, after a certain point, um, competitive products are able to offer similar features, and there's less protection on the IP surrounding that. And also, as we get into 2029, there are going to be price caps as well to say, you know what, this is the most you can charge for a medication in this category. Since there's, more maturity on the product, it's saying this needs to become something that's accessible, more accessible. And
So
all,
Alex, can you speed it up because I think we're running out of time. So
okay, I'll speed things up. Yes, of course. We're almost done with this. The competitive threat with Novartis's product also, given its the advantage, especially of the administration method, twice a year, versus something that a patient has to have on hand. There are twice as many there are twice as many prescribed of that product, and then other alternatives relative to Repatha as a whole. Okay, this is more, again, high level. We're looking at the different these are different regulations and such, but basically it's once it we're in 2026 now, so the rights aren't globally aren't as protected for this medication. And this is why I would personally recommend in for this project to um, pursue selling the rights to other partners for manufacturing to increase access, but also decrease the burden of having the of producing the medication within AMGEN's own facilities, but also um, by producing it in other facilities, it can lower the cost um, to reach a greater market share. And it's a significant expenditure, but that's already, the product's already been proven, it's already on the market. So shifting to other um, similar products within the portfolio would be a good way um, to keep pushing more novel ideas and further this research with new concepts. That's all I have on my end. I know we're short on time, but if there are any questions, I'd be happy to go into that further.
all right, thanks, Alex. Nice job. I think the patent expiration was a key uh, date that probably should have been mentioned, I think, in my mind a little bit earlier. I guess the dilemma of how to proceed and what to do with this going forward, I maybe could have been explained a little bit better too in terms of clarity for me. Maybe Tom understands it better, but I think as it nears its end of life, I'm assuming you have fewer options unless you can reformulate, right?
So there's two, so late life cycle product, you're 100% right. All the focus is going to be on the patent expiration. However, there's two nuances specific to Repatha that I just want to highlight why Amgen's still really excited actually for the long-term health of this product. First is it's a biosimilar. I'm sorry, it's a biologic. And the difference between a biologic versus a traditional large molecule therapy is there is not an exact replica. A biosimilar is a similar product, but it's not like a pill that you're going to take that's generic. That is exactly the same product as the innovative treatment. And so a lot of times healthcare professionals are reluctant to switching existing patients that are already on a biologic to a biosimilar due for it's like safety reasons and other reasons. So biologic treatments have a longer life after the patent expires than a large molecule. So that's one thing here. The other thing too is really interesting, and this just kind of goes to show that the pharmaceutical industry has never done studying treatments. And essentially last year, I mean, this is really hot off the press. We just published new data because it was originally approved, you're right, August of 2015 to lower cholesterol. But in November of 2025, we got an expanded indication based on new data that we researched on lowering serious cardiovascular events, heart attacks, strokes, and other large coronary events. And what's really promising about this is how much Repatha now may lower other healthcare costs of patients that ladder up into health plans due to they're no longer potentially going to have a stroke. They're no longer going to have a heart attack, which is a huge cost burden on health plans. And so, based on that data that we just published, there's actually quite a bit of excitement on the future financial benefits that Repatha will provide to the healthcare community and not just the US, but globally.
Absolutely, Tom. That's awesome to hear about. I mean, the more you can increase access for healthcare in general, whether it's um, medication, medical devices, services, it's always a positive. That's one of the things that I kind of worked on a bit. This is back in 2020 with the startup I worked with. Um, it was a challenge thinking about COVID because it's not just a matter of, okay, like antigen tests, they've existed for decades. It wasn't hard to adapt one for COVID. Um, it was just a question of how do you increase the access of it? How do you increase the reliability, the confidence of patients using it? Because traditionally it's something that's administered by a healthcare provider, but we saw, as we got into 2020 and onwards, now you have more things that are available at home. There's no reason why you have to go into a doctor's office to swab your nose. Nasal pharyngeal swab, that will probably, I don't recommend doing that yourself. That's kind of uncomfortable anyway, but yeah, it's always nice to have options and to make just getting the healthcare that you need easier.
I just had a quick observation here in that in terms of the business case, I think bringing a little bit more clarity and structure would be helpful. You mentioned $11.2 billion by 2032. It wasn't quite clear what assumptions went into that. Is it with this kind of structural cliff happening? Is it, kind of, I think building a more of a quantitative business case, taking into account even what you just said with more clarity, that would be good. Also, in terms of the competitive analysis, maybe a different format that more clearly kind of lays out how products are stacked against each other and even more nuanced based on what Tom said in that maybe by itself it does this, but overall costs of healthcare kind of, I think some more structure around those nuanced analyses would be helpful.
Yeah, at this stage of the product's life cycle, you have options to reduce the price, reduce the cost, increase the revenue by going after new markets, and maybe some combination of maybe laying out option 1, 2, 3, 4 to kind of give people a sense of how you looked at it in a more systematic way. I agree. Otherwise, I thought it was a great job, Alex. Thank you. I know it was a little bit untraditional to go after something that isn't necessarily in R&D, but it's actually out there in the world. So, and I think in that sense, it's a lot lower risk in many ways. There's a lot less risk analysis and a little bit more opportunity analysis to say what is left of the opportunity in its lifespan, a couple of years before end of cycle.
And
We're going
Mark,
to
just real
pivot.
quick on that,
Sure.
especially for a drug that's treating cardiovascular diseases where there's hundreds of millions. This isn't a rare disease, right? And so you'll see that more common in a therapeutic area that has high prevalence.
Yep. With that, I want to thank you, Tom. I know we're going to be pivoting away from drug discovery, so if you want to take off, that's fine. Thank you for your time tonight and your expertise. We're going to pivot to two AWS projects. The first one is AI Innovation Campus, which is in Salem and Falls Townships. Deb and Jana, this is yours. So if you want to take it away.
Sure, I'll just share my screen.
Okay. So these are two data center projects. I guess you can call them hyperscale, right?
That's the buzzword of our times, Mark.
Hyperscale or data center?
Both.
Well, what's scary is that the ROI isn't always clear, and we could be on the precipice of some sort of a collapse of valuations as a result, because it's possible that we've got a bubble here, right?
Yep.
Okay, is my screen visible?
It's visible. We got it.
All right. So good evening, everyone. My topic was AI Innovation Campus project in Pennsylvania, which is proposed to be a $20+ billion investment to build large-scale AI data center infrastructure. So this project aims to support the rapidly growing demand for AI computing and cloud services. Mainly while evaluating this project, I have applied several analytical frameworks that includes the PMI project management principles, PESTEL environmental scanning, a stage gate investment decision model, cost benefit, financial analysis, and global risk framework. So the agenda, I have primarily divided into two parts. The part one will be focusing on project plan, where we examine the project scope, energy, strategy, resources, timeline, and financial projection. Part two would be the strategic recommendations to the board that will analyze the risk, regulatory factors, and possible exit strategies. This project proposes building mainly two large hyperscale AI campuses in Pennsylvania, representing an investment of $20 billion. The campus is supposedly to include 25 building powered by approximately 1.5 gigawatts of nuclear energy, making it one of the largest AI infrastructure project in the United States. Final projection estimate annual revenue of approximately $18 billion once the campus fully reaches its operational capacity and is operational. Using cost benefit analysis and capital budgeting method, we estimate here the project could achieve a payback period as well, which we will be seeing in the slides ahead. So the main objective of this project is to address the rapidly increasing demand for AI computing and infrastructure. Large AI models, specifically if I talk about LLMs, require enormous computational resource and electricity, which is driving companies to build specialized hyperscale data centers. To evaluate the external environment for this investment, we conducted a PESTEL analysis. From a political perspective, Pennsylvania offers strong government support. Economically, the AI cloud market is growing rapidly. Technologically, demand for AI infrastructure is increasing. Environmentally, the project benefits from carbon-free nuclear power, and legally, regulatory frameworks are also well established for the data centers development in this specific state. So this analysis kind of suggested that the external environment is favorable for large-scale AI infrastructure investment. The project will be developed across two campuses. The first campus is in Salem Township, which is estimated to have around 15 data center buildings with approximately 960 megawatts of capacity. And the second campus is Falls Township with additional 10 buildings with around 500 megawatts of capacity. So from a project management perspective, the scope of the project was defined using PMI's scope management framework, which included scope planning, scope definition, and work breakdown structure development. Here, the dual campus approach provides several strategic advantages. So it distributes operational risk, allows phased expansion of infrastructure, and improves energy distribution across the regional power grid. Energy is one of the most critical factors in AI data center operations because these facilities generally consume enormous amount of electricity. So the campus is expected to require approximately 1.5 gigawatts of power, which is almost comparable to the electricity usage of a small city. To secure reliable energy, AWS has also signed a long term power purchase agreement with Talon Energy for nuclear power from the nearby Susquehanna plant. So we evaluated the energy strategy using levelized cost of energy analysis, which compared the electricity cost across the different energy sources. And the analysis showed that the nuclear power provides a stable and cost efficient energy supply at a rate of $24 per megawatt hour, which also supporting AWS sustainability goals through carbon-free energy. And the rate is comparatively cheaper as compared to the other sources. The total capital investment required for this is estimated between 20 to 25 billion. The largest cost component in this project is the IT equipment, which includes servers, networking infrastructure, and AI chips. Other major costs included building construction, mechanical system, and the electrical infrastructure. To evaluate the financial feasibility of this investment, we conducted capital budgeting analysis, including NPV, total cost of ownership, and also life cycle cost analysis. This method indicated that the project's long-term revenue potentially outweighs its initial capital expenditure. The project requires both a large construction workforce and a permanent operational team. Once operational, the campus is expected to employ more than 1,250 skilled workers, including engineers, IT specialists, resources, and security staffs. During construction, several thousand constructors will also be involved. And this numbers, I got it from the online resources of Amazon AWS that was available. Resource planning was conducted as well using PMI resource management principle, which included workforce planning, capacity forecasting, and infrastructure resource allocation. Benchmarking against either hyperscale data center projects such as this workforce projection are consistent with the industry standard. Also, there are physical resources as well listed in the slide that would be required, which include structural steel, concrete, electric cable, battery system, diesel generator, cooling equipments. So this is a scheduling exercise that I have done using AI. So the project is suggested to extend from 2024 to 2035. So in the phase one, that is initial land acquisition and rezoning began in 2024, construction began in 2025, and the first operational building are expected by 2026. So expansion continues through 2031 until the campus reaches its full capacity. The schedule was developed using critical path method project scheduling, which identifies the sequence of tasks that determines the overall project duration. Additionally, I also followed a stage gate development structure where each major phase required a decision review before moving forward. Revenue projections here are based on the rapidly growing demand. We can see that there's a growing demand for AI cloud services, and for AWS, this is crucial to stay relevant in the market and also gain a competitive advantage over its competitors. So AWS already generates over 108 billion annually, and AI services are expected to grow at 40 to 60% per year. Industry benchmarks show that each megawatt of data center capacity can generate approximately 8 to 12 million in annual revenue using scenario modeling and demand forecasting, we estimate that the campus could generate between 12 and 18 billion in annual revenue at full capacity. So these projections were evaluated using cost benefit analysis and financial forecasting models. So these are the recommendations that we have for the board. My recommendation was to approve the project and proceed with full investment. This decision was evaluated using a stage gate investment decision model. In this framework, project passed through several decision checkpoints that included feasibility analysis, business case validation, development readiness, and deployment. Based on the analysis, the project successfully meets the criteria at each stage, including strong market demand, favorable financial returns, and also manageable operational risk. So this is the risk analysis metrics. Although the project shows strong potential, it also has several risks that we should be aware of. We evaluated this risk using the PMI risk management framework, which categorizes risks by likelihood and impact. The major risk categories included regulatory risk, environmental risk, supply chain risk, and cybersecurity risk. These risks were mapped on a likelihood impact matrix to determine their priority and guide mitigation strategies. I have further, basing on that framework, I have further narrowed it down to the top 4 risks that could be impactful. So, to better understand the broader risk environment, we compared the project risk profiles with the World Economic Forum Global Risk Framework. Key global risks relevant to this project included geopolitical tensions affecting semiconductor supply chain, cybersecurity threats targeting critical infrastructure, and climate-related environmental risks. To mitigate this risk, AWS planned to diversify chip suppliers, implement advanced cybersecurity protocols, and design infrastructure resilient to environmental challenges. This is the exit strategy. Even though the project appears financially viable, it is important to prepare for a contingency plan, and using real option analysis and strategic portfolio planning, we evaluated several possible exit strategies. This included the first exit plan was to temporarily pause construction, forming a joint venture with another technology was the second probable exit strategy. Third was redirecting investment to other region. Fourth and the last was to fully divesting the assets. These options ensure that AWS maintains flexibility even if the market or the regulatory conditions change in future. The project is subject to oversight from several regulatory agencies. This includes the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and the environmental regulators such as EPA and Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. From a stakeholder analysis perspective, I also evaluated organizations like PJM Interconnection and Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission, which manages electricity grid operations and utility regulation. Overall, regulatory analysis suggested that the project is supportive but requires ongoing engagement with energy and environmental regulators. However, from local regulatory bodies like Falls Township and Salem Township, it has already been approved. So that is in a good stage. So to conclude my analysis, it indicates that AWS AI Innovation Campus is strategically the most important investment, and it should go ahead with it using specifically frameworks like PESTEL, PMI project management methodology, cost benefit financial evaluation, stage gate investment, decision models, and global risk assessment. I determined that the project offers a strong long-term value, although there are risks related to the regulations like supply chain, infrastructure, climate regulation. These risks are manageable through appropriate mitigation strategies. Based on the analysis, I recommend that the board approve the project and proceed with the full development. Yeah, with this, we can come to the end. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. It was a very thorough analysis. I'm a little bit concerned about the source of energy here. I know you said there was a power purchase agreement, and it was effectively against some nuclear capacity that already exists, or is it with new capacity?
The contract that I mentioned, it already exists.
Because 1.5 gigawatts is the equivalent of almost 2 nuclear power plants worth of output. I
Yeah,
mean,
so right now,
that's a lot, and the PJM is as an interconnect is already significantly stressed, isn't it? I know prices across PJM have gone up quite dramatically, and I know there's a lot of public, what's the word for it? Public protest against new construction of data centers.
yes, there has been a few protests. With my research, I came across around the areas regarding energy and also with flood and water scarcity. So those are still ongoing. Right now, there's no decision around that. So excited to see how that turns out.
Yep, I consider that a pretty significant risk, especially since the cost of that energy continues to climb, and a lot of that is being passed on to the consumer. Um, I'm also a little bit worried about the actual ROI or NPV. What would you did you calculate an ROI, and what would the number look like?
I have to go to the report. Just a moment.
I know you mentioned stage gate a couple of times. I consider this the equivalent of a stage gate review. In fact, this entire session today is the equivalent of a stage gate review across multiple products and product lines.
So the NPV was at a 40% operating margin. So an annual revenue that was I calculated it came up to around $15 billion.
Okay, it's very impressive, and I hope it's correct because I see some subtle shifts in the market, and that is towards more edge computing. So, I mean, already I'm running LLMs on my laptop, and I suspect before not too long, maybe a year or two from now, almost everybody on this call will be running LLMs locally instead of in the cloud. And the reason for that is compute is getting more capable, and the models are getting more efficient. Um, I'm running 64 gigs on my laptop. Most people don't have that. But in the future, you won't need 64 gigs of memory. You won't need a powerful GPU. So I think a lot of this assumption about growth and demand might actually be a little bit inflated because people are going to be shifting towards more local solutions. Any thoughts, Arbella, in terms of what you saw and what you heard today?
Nothing to add what you just said. Those are risks that I think a lot of the market is facing right now with the hyperscalers. But I thought the analysis was very thorough.
Yeah.
Just touching on a lot of, project management tools, the way that they're intended to be used. So great
Yeah.
job.
Yeah, very professionally done, very well packaged, and I think very well delivered. So I think all in all, I would say you did a great job. So I want to thank you, and let's
Thank you.
move on if we can, unless there's other comments. Deb and Johnny did a great job. So let's move on to AWS Project Rainier. This is in New Carlisle, Indiana. Sukbat and Sagar, you're up next.
Hello everyone. Let me share my screen. Are you guys seeing my screen?
We can see it. Yep.
Okay.
It's a little bit blocked at the moment. It's partially blocked, but yeah, okay, now we got it.
So, hello everyone. Today, Sagar and I will discuss about the project plan for the AWS Project Rainier, which is a hyperscale data center campus. So, this project was developed as a part of the project management course. So, let's start from the agenda. For this presentation, we will follow this agenda First, we will introduce the project overview, context, and industry. And starting from the second half of the agenda, the Sagar will take over the presentation. So the project Rainier is part of Amazon Web Services strategy to expand the infrastructure for AI and then the high performance computing. The AI systems require extremely powerful computing environments. Hyperscale data centers are also essential to support these workloads. So overall, our project is some specific numbers shown here, like total investment 11 billion. The IT workload is 720 megawatt. The span for the project is overall 66 months, and then there will be overall more than 8 buildings for this data center campus. When planning this project, we consider several important factors, like the hyperscale data centers require large-scale infrastructure, including the power supply and the cooling supply, which is essential for the data center, and then the network connectivity. And then secondly, those projects involve multiple stakeholders, such as an engineering, contractor, regulators, and the technology providers. The rest of the presentation, the basics is essential when defining the project plan. And here is the presentation of the factors we took. Like it's the planning factors is the long development cycle of these projects, and large technology infrastructure projects can take over 5 or more than 5 years from planning to full operation. And because of these, PMs must carefully coordinate engineering design, procurement, and construction phases to minimize delays and control costs. The rapid growth of AI is dramatically increasing, so the demand for computing infrastructure. So companies across many industries are using AI for their automation, for their analytics and machine learning applications. As a result, cloud providers like AWS must expand their infrastructure to meet this growing demand. There are overall 4 types of data centers. Our project Rainier goes to the hyperscale data center, which allows the companies, which help the companies maintain the competitive advantage, scalability, and the technological leadership in the AI era. Moving on, the project scope statement. The scope of the project includes developing hyperscale data center campus with multiple interconnected facilities. This includes land development, data center buildings, electrical infrastructure, cooling systems, and the network connectivity. All these components must be integrated, must be handled all together for this data center campus. So here is our work breakdown structure for the data center campus. We divided into the 12 sections. If you see the first 4, it's like the first phases of the project, like defining and the planning. And starting from the 5, which is the procurement, the construction phase will begin from the 6 until the 10. If you see the 10, there will be network, CCTV, and fiber optic, and all these fragile networking systems. At all projects, these fragile systems are installed after the heavy construction works, because the reason is to avoid some damage to these expensive, very sophisticated systems. And regarding the energy requirements, our project will be projected to consume overall 828 megawatt. And out of this total power, the 86% will will go to the IT load. If we divide these numbers, so the 1.15, the power usage effectiveness will drive DDL number for the PU is like 1 because because the higher efficiency because it means the higher efficiency you can use the most of the total power for the IT load only. So overall the industry average is 1.58, but for this project it's way better than the industry average. And the another requirement is like scalability. You have to consider the future expansion in the project. So in the left side of the slide, the bottom section, the there will be 4 buildings that remain unbuilt, which will be built for the future construction, future phases. And the other requirements for the project is electrical systems, cooling, and the network infrastructure. Overall, the project requires strong power, efficient cooling systems, and also the high-speed networking to support the large-scale AI operations. So moving on, I will hand over the presentation to the Sagar. So are you there, Sagar?
Thanks a lot, Subhat.
Yeah.
And hello, everyone. So building on the technical requirement we just discussed, I will now walk through the financial and operational aspect of the project, starting with the capital investment. And in terms of the capital cost, the estimated capital cost for the project trainer is approximately $11 billion. And this includes the land development, building construction, electrical infrastructure, cooling system, and the IT equipment installation. And managing a budget of this scale requires strong cost control as well as the careful resource planning. And in terms of the human resource plan, large infrastructure project also requires a diverse workforce. The project would involve construction workers, engineers, IT specialists, project managers, and the operational staff. Also, for effective coordination between these teams is critical for maintaining schedule as well as ensuring successful project delivery. And we would love to talk about the project schedule as well briefly. Based on the industry benchmark, the overall project timeline is expected to be approximately 5 to 6 years. The project includes phases such as planning, permitting, construction, equipment installation, and final commissioning. And also, the proper scheduling ensures that these phases are coordinated efficiently. And in terms of revenue and the business case, from the financial perspective, the project has strong revenue potential. Demand for cloud computing and AI service continues to grow rapidly, and the hyperscale data centers generate revenue through cloud infrastructure services. And this creates a strong long-term business case for the investment. And here we have created 3 scenarios: low case, base case, as well as the high case. And we have also done our annual revenue analysis, operating margin analysis, as well as the payback period, as well as the NPV. So we can see the base case and the high case are doing really good. And in terms of the risk analysis, however, the project of this scale also involved a significant risk. These risks include construction delays, supply chain disruption, technical integration challenges, and the regulatory approvals. And identifying this kind of risk allows project managers to plan the mitigation strategy early in the process. And while talking about the risk analysis, another major risk involved the power infrastructure and the equipment lead time. Data centers require specialized electrical equipment that may have long manufacturing timelines, and delays in this kind of components can directly impact the overall project schedules. And about the risk summary, our overall assessment highlight the importance of the strong project governance, supplier coordination, and the contingency plan. This strategy help minimizing the disruption and ensure ensure that the project stays within the schedule and within the budget. So here we have created the matrix of impact as well as the probability. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. And talking about the risk analysis, the continuous risk monitoring is also critical throughout the project lifecycle. And by regularly reviewing the risk and adjusting mitigation plan, project manager can maintain better control over the project outcomes. And about the regulatory approach and the key permits, uh, it is actually another key consideration in regulatory compliance. The project requires approval related to zoning, environmental impact, construction permits, and the utility connections. And managing these approvals effectively help avoid delays during the development. And then about the recommendation, we believe that based on our analysis, we recommend a go decision, but with certain conditions. And those are the strategic case for the project is strong, but the investment should proceed using a phased development approach to manage risk and adapt to further demand, as well as we have also panned out some of the no-go conditions as well as the exit strategy, because we can see however the project should, I mean, if major risks are materialized, such as regulatory barriers or major cost overrun, the project should be reevaluated to protect investment and the resources. And in conclusion, the project runner represent a major opportunity to expand AI infrastructure capacity with proper planning, risk management, and phase development. The project can deliver significant long-term strategic values. And also, we have not included in this slide, but I would also like to talk about the data that we were able to gather from the web. That was the earned value as well as the actual cost, which was 1.2 billion for earned value and 1.3 billion for the actual cost. And the cost performance index based on this two value was about 0.92. It is a little bit in the flagged zone because it has the cost overrun, but then again, with a proper mitigation strategy, we believe that it is a good and high revenue generating project. Only you have to be little careful. And as we talked earlier, that the funding that has to be used in this particular project has to be used in a phased and a very careful manner. So yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
All right, I'm very glad you were able to work in the cost performance index and the performance against the plan. I think it's very well packaged. This is a much more traditional kind of project management view, which is really what we were looking for here. Well organized, well delivered, and even easy to understand. It's one of the questions I would have is when you looked at the costs, did you factor in that the technology, the GPUs, the compute, if you will, would need to be replaced within a 5-year period?
Actually, Professor, the issue that we have faced during this particular project and our researchers was the data was not really very available for us. So we had to do a lot of comparison with a similar kind of data center. And the thing again with the data center is most of the data centers which are being built across the United States are in the range of 400 to 500 megawatt. But then again, this particular data center is going in the range of 700 to 800 megawatt. So, and also since we were not really having that kind of details, so we could not really touch on those kind of areas.
Right. I think that's been one of the fallacies that a lot of these analysis, not necessarily from this class, but outside this class, that the technology itself has a very short shelf life, probably less than 5 years, maybe even less than 4 years. So
That's true,
imagine
Professor.
all that compute that is being, premium prices being paid to NVIDIA and others will have to be redone every 3 to 4 years.
But then again, I would like to add to your point, Professor. Like Subha just mentioned in one of the slide that in this kind of data center, they do have provision to expand further that we have highlighted with different kind of colors of those square boxes.
Right.
And since you mentioned that in every 5 years the technology do get advanced and do develop further. So in that kind of expansion, these Amazon or other data center builders do have that provision to adopt that kind of adopt and incorporate that kind of technology in their data center in the further expansion area. And after that, the do all the other retrofitting work for the already existing buildings.
I don't know much about New Carlisle, but I know the state of Indiana in general is very favorable to industry and to even controversial industries that are polluting. So did you call out New Carlisle as a particularly high risk or low risk place to do business?
We would say it is a bit of high risk, but high rewarding industry
Okay.
in terms of New Carlisle.
And was it chosen because of its proximity to grid assets and resources, or access to water, or some other reason?
It's selected based on the also the locational benefits, like it is the middle of the it's right behind below the Michigan Lake, so it can goes to the east side and the west side for this the population. And also the interesting feature for this project is like the chips they are trying to build for the IT load is also the produced manufactured from the Amazon itself. So for the risks with the supply chain of the chips, it's low.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of companies, especially Google, they're using their own chipsets now. So they're not embracing
Yeah.
NVIDIA. They've got TPUs that are very specialized and very efficient for what they do. So for training purposes, as a training data center, they literally can leverage their own chipsets at a lower cost and higher efficiency and better packaging. Any thoughts, Arbella, from your side?
No, great job. Well packaged. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks
Thank
a lot,
you.
Arbella
Thank you to
and
both
Mark.
of
Thank
you.
you.
I thought you did a great job. Let's move to our last team for tonight, which is the Crucible JV Smelter in Tennessee, and that's Nicholas and Ama.
Okay.
Yes. Are you guys seeing the
Oh
presentation?
yeah, a lot of cars. Is that unsold inventory from Hyundai, or what's going on?
That's all the material that we'll be able to utilize with this smelting facility.
Okay. Sounds great.
Cool. Last but not the least, Nick and I will be presenting on the Crucible joint venture project, which is a strategic collaboration between Korea Zinc and the United States Department of Defense. And it proposes to build a large-scale smelting complex in Tennessee to strengthen specifically domestic production of critical minerals that are essential for advanced technologies and national defense systems, for example. We can go to the next slide. So this project is significant because it directly addresses national security concerns that are related to critical mineral supply chains. The United States currently relies heavily on foreign processing capacity for many of its critical mineral needs, particularly from China, and it creates strategic vulnerabilities because these materials are essential for defense systems, advanced technologies, and infrastructure. So to address this issue, the project is structured as a partnership between Korea Zinc and the US government, and the Department of Defense actually holds about 40% equity stake in the joint venture, and that highlights how strategically important it is for the country. So by developing domestic smelting capacity, the US can secure reliable supply chains and maintain technological leadership in this critical industry. Yeah, so the smelting facility will process a range of critical minerals that will support multiple high technology industries. So the metals are essential for semiconductor manufacturing, telecommunications infrastructure like 5G networks, and hardware that's used for artificial intelligence systems. The metals also play an important role in defense technologies, renewable energy systems like solar panels, wind turbines, and especially the electrification of transportation now, for example. So because these minerals support so many strategic sectors, ensuring a stable supply of these minerals is essential for economic security and technological innovation as well. Yeah, so looking at the market context, demand for critical minerals has increased significantly in recent years, and that's due to rapid technological growth across several industries. So, for example, I mentioned like the electrification of transportation that has increased demand for metals that are used in batteries and electric vehicles. At the same time, the expansion of semiconductor manufacturing and renewable energy infrastructure has created additional pressure on global mineral supply chains. Defense manufacturing as well, aerospace systems, they require a steady supply of some of these metals. And despite this growing demand, the United States still imports a large portion of its refined critical minerals. So that exposes the country to certain geopolitical risks, for example, and then supply disruptions that could result. So the Crucible Smelter project is aiming to help close this gap and create domestic refining capacity. Just quickly on the scope. The scope of the Crucible project involves constructing a fully integrated smelting and refining complex. The facility will include raw material receiving systems, smelting furnaces, refining units, rare metal extraction systems, also a sulfuric acid production plant, and environmental emissions control systems. So, in terms of output, the plant will primarily produce metals like zinc, lead, and copper, and then along with several valuable rare metals like indium, gallium, etc. The facility will also recover valuable byproducts like gold, silver, and sulfuric acid, which will also help to improve the overall economic efficiency of this project and of this plant. So by integrating these operations into a single complex, the project can efficiently process multiple metals from complex mineral feedstocks. And I'll hand over to Nick, who can walk us through the location, technology, and then the schedule for the project.
Yeah, thanks, Amma. So this facility will be located in Clarksville, Tennessee, and it represents one of the largest industrial investments in the state's history. So the project will require approximately 700 million square feet of industrial infrastructure, and this involves about $7.4 billion in total investment. So in addition to the economic impact, this facility is expected to create around 740 permanent jobs across the complex or two operational locations. So major infrastructure components include electric furnaces, hydrometallurgical processing units, logistics systems, wastewater treatment plants, and environmental filtration systems. This project will utilize advanced smelting technologies similar to those used at the other Korean zinc location, Osan, their complex in South Korea. This is one of the most advanced smelting operations in the world. And some key technologies taken away from there are the electric smelting furnaces for the thermal metal processing and hydrometallurgical refining systems for producing high purity metals. This plant will also use solvent extraction systems to recover rare metals and digital automation technologies to improve efficiencies and reliability. Additionally, advanced emissions capture systems will be in place to ensure compliance with environmental regulations. So here, to capture kind of our timeline, ranging from 2026 to 2029, the construction timeline will be complete in these 4 years. So the first phase will involve permitting and site preparation between 2026 to 2027. The second phase includes the construction of the main facility structures. And then during 2028, the major equipment will be installed, followed by testing and commissioning between 28 and 29, to ensure that all systems operate safely and efficiently before going into full production at the end of 2029. And so here, proposed timeline, utilizing the Gantt chart. Here we visually represent the kind of critical path sequence of construction activities, including site preparation, facility construction, equipment installation, and commissioning, along that critical path into fully commercial operations. And then here is, again, the information organized in the grid layout, with tentative resources being assigned to these tasks. So I'll hand it back over to Amma to go through the investment structure.
Yeah. So the overall investment structure for this project totals approximately $7.4 billion. The majority of the investment is about 6.6 billion, and that's allocated to construction capital expenditures, including building the facility, installing specialized smelting equipment, developing supporting infrastructure, implementing environmental control systems, and all the other components that we've discussed. And then the remaining about $800 million is allocated to working capital to support financing costs, operational reserves, and the initial inventory that will be needed to begin production once the facility becomes operational. From our research, the funding for the project is coming from multiple sources: equity investment from Korea Zinc, financing from the U.S. government, strategic investors, and then commercial bank loans. We did a financial analysis that's shown on this slide. And this is super conservative compared to the current pricing of some of these metals, just to show that the model, this still is a safe or sound project plan-wise. So the financial model for the project diversifies the revenue streams and reduces exposure to price volatility in any single commodity. So the facility will produce, zinc, lead, copper, and then smaller quantities of other rare metals. And based on estimated production levels and current, conservative estimates of market prices, zinc is expected to generate about $750 million in annual revenue, lead about $400 million, copper about $298 million, and then rare metals about $100 million. So together, these outputs will generate like an estimated $1.5 billion in annual revenue. And so we went ahead to do a sensitivity analysis to test how the project will perform under different market conditions. So for example, if metal prices fall by 10%, the project returns would decrease by roughly only 3%. And then if construction costs will increase by 10%, the payback period that we calculated will extend by about 2 years. So the project would still remain economically viable, at least moderately so. And then overall, we think this diversified approach will help to provide financial resilience and a stable long-term revenue potential for this project. We went ahead as well to do a risk assessment, and we used the World Economic Forum Global Risk Framework. So like any large industrial infrastructure project, this project will definitely involve several potential risks. And the WEF framework categorizes these risks into economic, environmental, geopolitical, technological, and societal. And some of the stuff that we came up with was economic risks like commodity price volatility, global economic slowdowns that could affect the prices of these metals. Environmental risks like challenges with water management and flooding risks that are associated with large industrial operations like this. Geopolitical risks like potential trade restrictions or export controls that could disrupt supply chains. Technological risks like possible failures during integration of advanced automation systems, like we were saying, and then societal risks like shortages of skilled labor, which could impact construction and then the operations. We looked at some mitigation strategies like hedging contracts to stabilize the revenue projections, engineering redundancy as well, so that the facility can maintain operations even when individual components require maintenance or experience unexpected failure. Further supply diversification and workforce training programs as well. We also looked at the federal and state environmental regulations that the project will have to comply with. The primary regulatory bodies overseeing the project that we found are the US EPA and then the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. So the facility will have to implement advanced emissions capture systems to meet federal clean air standards and minimize environmental impact. It'll also have to include comprehensive wastewater treatment systems and strict hazardous materials handling protocols. These environmental safeguards are critical for ensuring that the facility operates responsibly while maintaining compliance with regulatory requirements. I'll hand it back over to Nick to conclude.
Thanks. Yep. So supply chain strategy with this project. The project's supply chain strategy focuses on securing feedstock from North American sources. So the primary suppliers will include mining operations in the United States, as well as some established producers in Canada and Mexico. This regional diversification will reduce any geopolitical risk and lower transportation costs compared to importing materials from further distant regions. So overall, this strategy will help ensure long-term supply stability for the smelting facility. And so our recommendation, based on the analysis conducted for this project, we are recommending a conditional go. The project shows strong financial potential, strategic importance for national security, and significant government support. However, the final decision depends mainly on several conditions being met, including regulatory approvals, securing long-term feedstock supply contracts, and maintaining strict cost controls during the construction. So with that being said, kind of some risk mitigation exit strategy ideas. If the project economics change significantly, or we provided some contingency strategies here. So the first option, kind of partial asset divestiture, which would involve selling certain facilities or equipment to recover that capital expenditure. Another possibility would be restructuring the joint venture by adjusting ownership and kind of operational responsibilities amongst the partners. And finally, the infrastructure could be repurposed for different ideas such as refining battery materials or critical minerals as market demands shift. So in summary, the Crucible joint venture smelter represents a transformative investment in the United States critical minerals infrastructure. This project will process over 1 million tons of feedstock annually and produce more than 540,000 tons of refined metals. It'll support key industries, including semiconductors, defense manufacturing, aerospace, and electric vehicle technology. With this construction expected to begin in 2026 and commercial operations starting around the end of 2029, this project has the potential to significantly strengthen America's industrial and technology capabilities.
So when do you see this becoming operational?
So we see it at the end of 2029 is the target from what we've researched and what we've plugged into
Is
our.
there everything I've always read told me it takes 10 to 15 years to make a mining operation, commercially viable, from start to finish. So I'm kind of shocked that this thing started in 25 and you're saying it'll be operational in 29. So that's only 4 years. That's pretty impressive. Is that because they're pouring so much money into it, or it's got the backing of the government, the federal government?
I believe, yeah, we're leveraging heavily the funding and surplus of funds from the government and their prioritization of these kind of material issues.
I hope everyone on this call can appreciate the unprecedented nature of this project, and perhaps one of the reasons I added it to the list. Not just the scale, not just the fact that we're putting a new mining operation in Tennessee, which frankly is a pretty friendly state to do it in. It's kind of like Indiana in that sense, but rather the fact that the federal government is putting 40% of the money into it, or is expecting a 40% equity stake as a result, is, I think, pretty unusual. And I didn't think until this administration, I didn't think that the federal government was, trying to collect equity stakes in private companies and publicly traded companies, but apparently we are. And this is an interesting kind of twist to what I would normally assume to be the federal government's role.
Yeah.
Did you find it odd as well?
Yeah, 40% is a pretty high number.
I mean, it's not unprecedented for this administration. They've been doing it for semiconductors and I think even battery plants. So I think they've been doing this in other industries as well. But
Yeah.
one thing I will point out is that, we only graduate about 300 mining engineers in this country every year. China graduates something closer to 12,000. So that's a 40-to-1 ratio, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of explains why they're so far ahead of us when it comes to, raw material mining, right?
Yeah.
So I think we can build all we want, but if we don't have the skill sets, we're going to either have to import them or train them one way or the other.
Yeah.
Right.
True.
Actually, my mind went to the exact topic that you're bringing up, Mark, in terms of the confidence level and the project plan ending in 2029. So there may be some interesting points for you to look into, and that what's the basis of that timeline, right? So maybe there is a lot to be said about the partnership with Korea Zinc, right? Like, for
Yeah.
example, if you could highlight, oh, these are some similar size projects. Yes, this is unprecedented, but it's not the first in the world, correct?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
how does this compare to what's been done before? I think that those would be interesting data points to look at.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, what I meant was the unprecedented federal government involvement, equity stakes, and partnership with a Korean firm. I mean, they just seem unusual to me. I guess it
Right.
just seems like very odd behaviors for politicians who normally would say we're not supposed to pick winners and we're supposed to let the free market, go in whatever direction the free market wants to go in. I'm told that Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan has got a significant,
Right. Yeah. We saw that
what is
too.
it? They're putting up a lot of the cash here, right?
Yeah. Yep.
I think this is a very strategic play for the country. I'm not trying to criticize it. I'm just kind of observing that this is an unusual situation. I don't think I've seen too much of the federal government putting up this kind of money and expecting this much equity, or just even having equity at all, right?
Yeah, I mean, clearly, I mean, I'm not definitely don't know a whole lot about this topic, but I know the subject of minerals keeps coming up even in conversations with Ukraine, and so it is. It must matter a whole lot in all sorts of ways. So for this to happen, it probably will benefit us in many different ways. So again, I think the main topic that maybe it can be made a little bit strong, kind of a point that can be made a little bit stronger is that given that we're putting all this money, $6.5 billion, et cetera, that's like instead of, and let's say JP Morgan puts up 40, 50% of it. If instead of 4 years, this becomes a 12-year project, obviously the cost of capital goes up tremendously, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
I do want to say you guys did a great job. I think it was very thorough, it was well organized, extremely well delivered. You guys obviously rehearsed it, which I think is key. One of the takeaways here to have am I right? You rehearsed it?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Okay. By the way, I can tell, and I don't mean that in a negative sense. I mean that in a positive sense. I appreciate it, right? Nobody wants to go to a play that hasn't been rehearsed. Nobody, right? And I think in having that rehearsal means that you're very efficient. You know what you want to say before you say it. There's not a lot of hems and haws. So I think we can all learn from that. I want to say overall, you guys did a fantastic job tonight. Very well researched across the board, all of your teams. I want to thank you. I want to, I guess, hear from you. Was this a valuable exercise to apply everything you learned over the 10 weeks into a specific project that you can really sink your teeth into? Is it valuable? I don't know. Amma, what do you think? You're the one I'm looking at now. So
Yeah, definitely valuable. I think also even knowing what to consider about a project, right? There's so many different things like the scope, what resources are available, the timeline, all these things that we've learned since week one. We've looked at projects that have succeeded, we've looked at projects that have failed as well, and
yeah,
we've picked something from each case study as well. So I think that definitely helped us to make more informed analyses on some of the numbers that we were seeing as we were researching, at least in the case for Nick and I. So yeah, this was very valuable, I would say.
excellent, great. Any other thoughts?
Yeah,
So,
I can share some thoughts.
sure.
I enjoyed working on a project at Amgen and then having Tom kind of talk about the reality of our project in the company. That was super interesting to see that we were on the right track with our estimates and our projections and how we thought it was going to go. And also as we progressed through the class, it just felt like the project made more sense. Maybe at the beginning, I felt kind of lost, but as soon as I started learning more about like project estimation and all that, it allowed my mind to flow a little bit better and understand what I needed to include in the project.
That's great. I'm glad it made more sense. It certainly all came together for you. I also wanted you guys to have an artifact that you can bring to your employer or potentially your future employer to say this is what a project plan can and should look like. Um, and by pulling all those pieces together, you have a more holistic view of what a specific project should look like and a project plan should look like. And I want to applaud what you've done tonight. Any thoughts from you, Arbella, before we leave?
No, just thank you for inviting me. All excellent projects, and I just want to echo what you said. There is no better way of really understanding the nuances of how to apply the project management tools than actually, taking a project, real life, real world project, and all of these are very, relevant topics that you had picked and to see you actually use the project management tools in these contexts is fantastic. This is the way to learn and make sure that you really kind of internalize what are the nuances about the way that these tools need to be used. So well done.
And you guys really stepped up. I know each and every one of you is outside of your comfort zone. I told you guys when you started the program that part of my job is to stretch you outside your comfort zone. None of you are in drug discovery. None of you, to my knowledge, work on data centers, and none of you have work with smelters. So every one of you was outside of your comfort zone. You stepped up. You were professional about it. You learned what you needed to learn. And I think your next job may force you to do the same anyway. So I'm only preparing you for what might be your next real world assignment. So with that, thank you all. It's starting to really rain pretty hard out here. So stay safe and stay dry. And I'll be giving you more detailed feedback as I do the grading for this assignment. Okay. Have a great break. I'll see you in the spring. Sai, thank you for your help for the whole quarter. Any thoughts from you, Sai, as a parting comment?
Yeah, Professor, it's a lovely course, and I enjoyed the course. So it's an amazing experience, and I enjoyed correcting the assignments as well. And just a final thing, like George has joined like pretty late, and he's supposed to submit, I think, 1 or 2 assignments. So George, can you please submit that? Like,
Yeah, I'll get that
Yeah.
done. Thank you.
Yeah, we can deal with that privately. We don't need to do that in public. But yeah,
yeah,
anyways, thank you all. And if you're missing any assignments, just get them in, and I'll see you after the break. Have a good break, and see you in the
Sorry,
spring.
just a
Yep,
question. Can I ask?
sure.
I think we have to do some peer reviews. I was just wondering, are we reviewing like who we worked on the project with? I know some people are alone on their project, so I wasn't sure.
I think there's a
Um,
survey link that was included there, right?
right.
So
So,
that survey link takes you to a SurveyMonkey's questionnaire.
right. So I think we're supposed to like I'm just wondering who are we reviewing? Because
The
we've
people
had
on your
different.
the project team, the final project team.
Okay,
So,
cool.
and then in most cases, apparently it was only a team of 1. So, some of you have a team of
Yeah,
2. So it should be a relatively easy thing. The original
yeah,
intent was when we had larger projects to have, a larger peer review. But this peer review is really whoever you work with on your final project.
got it. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, guys. Take care. See you
Thank you
later.
so
Thank you so much,
much.
Professor.
Thanks,
Feel
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
better.
Professor.
Professor.
Feel
Have a
better.
good
Sorry,
day.
no samosas tonight.
Oh.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Bye.
Make your own. Bye-bye.
Maybe in the first class of negotiations.
There you go. I promise you with negotiations, more fresh samosas.
I'll show up just to
Thank
get
you
a
so
samosa.
much.
Thank you,
Take care.
Professor.
bye-bye.
Have a good one.